So to our friends in the audience, we're going to get started in a minute. We're a little delayed due to a combination of weather and everybody's computer wanted to run an update. So we're just making it so that we can all access, and we'll be with you in a second. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. My name is Wei Mason. I'm the chair of the Transportation Standing Committee. It's January 26, 2023. Thank you for your patience as we updated our computers and people came in through the rain. This meeting has been called to order, and I will start by acknowledging that we are located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Today I am joined by Sean Cleary, a member of the committee, and Patty Cuddle, councillors. We've also been joined, thank you very much for gracing with your presence, Catherine Morse. We have regrets from Trish Purdy and Councillor Pam Lovelace, who had other engagements today. So we'll move on now to approval of the minutes of December 15th, 2022. I'll look for a mover of the minutes. Moved by Councillor Cuddle, seconded by Councillor Cleary. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you very much. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Anybody? Madam Clerk.
There's been no additions or deletions.
There are no additions and deletions. Anybody see anything they want to change in the committee? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve the order of business. Moved by Councillor Cleary, second by Councillor Cuddle. Any further discussion? You're the only one, so. Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All those in favor? It does. Opposed? Carries. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. Any declaration of conflict of interest? None. There are no motions of reconsideration, rescission, deferred business, table matters. Correspondence. Madam Clerk, is there any correspondence?
Correspondence has been received for item 10.3.1 as well as general correspondence.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any petitions?
No petitions from the clerk's office.
Do any members of the committee have petitions? I see none. So that moves us to the main reason we're here. Today is 10.3 presentations, and I'm looking at Bill to say we have no agenda other than this, but we'd put you off so long we decided to meet anyway for you. So if I would like to, for 10.3.1, I'd like to invite the Halifax Cycling Coalition, It's More Than Buses and Walk and Roll Halifax, to come on down, and you'll have 10 minutes. Keep it respectful, et cetera, but I know you know the drill, so I won't go on.
Am I live? Yes. Okay. Good. Yes. Thanks for placing us on the agenda. It was a little bit of a chore, but it was all. I'm sure it'll be all well worth it. Chair Mason, members of the committee, and Councillor Morris, thanks for you including us on the agenda this wet day. I'm Bill Campbell, Director of Walk and Roll Halifax.
My name is Talani Shan. I'm with the Halifax Cycling Coalition. Thanks.
Our It's More Than Buses representative could not be with us here today. In our presentation, we describe the major shortcomings we see in the implementation of the Integrated Mobility Plan as we see them, and we try to make concrete recommendations to the committee. We recognize at the outset that over the years, City has made good progress in this, but the process remains mostly reactive, and we are calling for a structured, proactive approach. We'll be making specific recommendations, or we'll be making specific references to several projects to make our point, but our goal is not to get bogged down in the details of those specifics. Instead, our recommendations intend to improve the implementation process for all projects with no change to the IMP content. I believe your legislative assistant has distributed a one-page handout. We'll be referring to that during the presentation. In preparing for this presentation, we were fortunate to be able to meet with the chair and the former co-chair, and with senior HRM officials, including Mike Connors, present today, and David McIsaac. Thanks to you all. Our advocacy is for safe, comfortable, and accessible mobility of pedestrians, transit users, and people cycling everywhere in our city. We refer to the Integrated Mobility Plan to support our advocacy. You're likely familiar with these IMP priorities and benefits. I draw your attention to the sustainability one. We consider the sustainability benefit an important part of the response to climate change, pollution reduction, healthy living, and vibrant communities. As we understand from your climate officials, they look to the IMP for direction on how to manage the impact of transportation on the climate. That's colorful. That's nice. The IMP describes a complete streets philosophy. One way we look at it is as follows. As your consultants begin a project, we feel that in order to abide by the IMP, they will start, as we say, from the top and work down. They will consider how best to meet the needs of people walking and rolling, how best to meet the needs of people cycling, how best to meet the needs of people taking transit, and so on, finishing on what space in the public right-of-way is available for moving typically single-occupant vehicles. But we have concerns. Infrastructure projects, both in the design stages or completed, invariably fail to meet the IMP priorities and pillars, the complete streets hierarchy, and equity criteria for equity-deserving groups and vulnerable road users. In your handout, there's excerpts from the IMP on the bottom, which with focus on the equity-deserving groups we call out, and it calls out, and the complete streets hierarchy, the inverted triangle. In this slide, I talked about the fail to meet statement, and this may sound a bit harsh. We know that we have examples like the Dartmouth North AT project was a fine example of embracing the IMP and providing leadership and public engagement. Similarly, we like what we're seeing in the attention to the needs of neighborhoods in the Graham's Grove AT project. Also, we've done some advocacy with blind and partially sighted persons and the CNIB. Executive Director Anguish has asked his colleagues to send transportation projects our way for comment, and we are seeing changes to those designs because of that input. However, we continue to have concerns where infrastructure projects prioritize vehicles, increase traffic volumes and flows rather than transit and vulnerable road users. One example of this approach is taken for the Windsor Street Exchange. The top two priority mobility modes were not given their own separated route, but were consolidated into one multi-use path. And for transit, there were two possible designs presented, one with no possibility of full transit priority, the other with only partial transit priority. That despite the fact that the corridor routes and/or bus rapid transit is going to have to go through the exchange. We also have concerns where infrastructure projects prioritize vehicle-centric corridors rather than human-centric neighborhoods. We are disappointed with some of the plans and designs we are seeing. A few of note: the Herring Cove Road Osborne Street intersection design in the Herring Cove Road project. The urban shoulder design in the Dartmouth East AT project. The Almond Street AT project, where a higher priority was put on street parking and traffic flow versus a protected cycling lane. And the proposed multi-use paths in Bears Lake Business Park versus protected cycle lanes and sidewalks where there are tons of room. Because of these shortcomings, we'd like to see a change from a reactive to a proactive process. We appear to have a current system that's reactive, where we document unmet priorities at several design stages, and maintain a civic dialogue with HRM staff. It should be said that the dialogue with HRM staff over the last few years has improved in that our advocacy groups are now included in 60% preliminary design plans discussions, as well as the 30% functional. We feel our input's valuable at both stages. However, we'd rather be in a position where we simply concur with the design because of its adherence to the IMP. We ask for these changes because as stakeholders, we cannot engage the consultants, and we do not have infinite resources to advocate for transit users and vulnerable road users. So we strongly recommend that the process urgently become proactive and transparent for vulnerable road users and transit users. We feel that the urgent request is doable. We drafted our recommendations, which will follow, with the intent that they could be implemented through administrative processes and not require any legislative change to the IMP. Our recommendations. So to create infrastructure projects consistent with HRM-approved policies and guidelines, we recommend proactive, plan, design, and evaluate with adherence to the inverted triangle priority approach, complete streets principles, and IMP pillars, with appropriate weight being given to equity-deserving populations identified in the IMP pillars. Transparent. During engagement on all design stages, document how the inverted triangle priority approach, complete streets principles, and IMP pillars were followed, and provide an explicit rationale for any departure. Accountable. Include these directions in the project's RFP and all project documents and communications. We feel these recommendations should be straightforward to implement. The proactive actions describe what the consultants should be doing now, including following the IMP evaluation process. The transparent actions simply require the consultants and the variance committee to, quote unquote, show their work. And the accountable actions are respectful and responsible communication principles. On the evaluation point, evaluation is critical to this proactive process. On the face of it, the evaluation process will require consultants to confirm that they have considered the IMP pillars and principles, to show how they have done it, and how well the designs adhere to the principles. We expect that the evaluation rubric will explicitly recognize the IMP pillars and principles. So as next steps, what we recommend is a motion by the committee to adopt a proactive, transparent, and accountable process by staff and consultants for the planning, design, implementation of major transportation infrastructure projects and AT projects with adherence to the IMP, including the use of a modified evaluation rubric. And I'll leave this slide up if there are any questions. And, but to reiterate, we recommend for major transportation infrastructure and AT projects that your consultants be required to proactively create plans and designs consistent with the IMP pillars and principles and complete street principles. Transparently document the path to their design outcomes, including any departure from the IMP principles, including decisions of the variance committee, using the IMP evaluation framework, and accountably include this information throughout the project from RFP to process and outcome evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation today. We have some questions of clarification. We'll start with Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this presentation. The active school transportation is something that I've become keenly interested in, particularly around this idea of human-centered neighborhoods and, looking at the equity criteria. I think we have been discussing at council, the fact that a lot of the infrastructure is kind of based on commuting to work and not necessarily looking at commuting to other destinations and neighborhoods, particularly children, where such a plan would benefit thousands of residents on a daily basis, 10 months out of 12. So I'm just wondering about, in terms of the active transit school, the active, is it AST, right? Active School Transit Program. What your thoughts are about that, and how, and when you talk about equity criteria, where would you see that being implemented?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Cuddle. Thanks for your question. I'll take that one to start. When you look at the IMP, it's so interesting how advanced it was in its thinking, and this was back in the early days of 2017 or 18. Because current literature now talks about, current literature in active transportation and mobility justice, that topic, all talk about sufficient access for people to go about their out-of-home activities. It ain't about commuting anymore. It's about how do people get from A to B, to go to the medical clinic, to go to school, to go to an appointment, also to go to work. And so it's that more holistic look at transportation. And when you hear the term, and we'll throw around the term accessibility, accessibility's moved on from curb ramps. It's moved on to more, okay, how do people get around to do their day-to-day work and tasks? And this is specific to school travel, because as you know, Councillor Cuddle, we're very keen to try to improve the environment for children walking or rolling or biking to school. And again, that's just another example of that, the accessibility for people to do out-of-home activities. From an equity point of view, what we refer to is equity deserving groups, and on the one hand, someone may say, well, everyone deserves equity, but on the other hand, some people have a little bit more equity than others right now, and we're looking at those who don't have the same rights and abilities that others do have. So I should point out that Mike and his teams and others have started to use things like the Canadian Index of Multiple Deprivation to identify communities which may have less abilities to participate in society than others for multiple reasons. One of them may be not owning a vehicle or not being able to own a vehicle and to get around. But what we try to do is put that equity lens on everything we do, and it comes out loud and clear through the IMP. So we would think that, and we would expect that any design coming out of an IMP process would include the equity lens.
All right, thank you. I would like to put a motion on the floor.
So, okay, my suggestion, usually what we do at this committee is after any questions of clarification, and so Councillor Lovelace is there, but my recommendation to council or to committee is that we do it at the next meeting, so we can do a notice of motion and work with staff and clerks to workshop it, because this is a hard-won experience of being here 10 years, as we often end up with motions that we do on the fly here that aren't exactly what we want later. So we can do it here, I won't stop you, but my recommendation is that we take it away when we come back next meeting with a motion that we've been able to workshop.
That's good advice, and I'll just, after Councillor Lovelace asks a question, I will state my intentions there.
Perfect. Okay, Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. I first of all apologize for coming in late. It's pretty wild out there. So I just want to look at the comment you made regarding mobility justice, and Councillor Cuddle really nailed it when she, talked about how this active transit can actually take place. For me, it's in this concern around rural communities where we can do wonderful things to help children get to school. But when they get to that school property, they then have to either walk through a busy traffic driveway, or they have to find their way to cross through a ditch, which is standing water, or climb over a snowbank to actually get onto school property. So I'm just wondering what you're hearing from an accessibility perspective with regards to the province looking and working with municipalities to understand that it's not just about complete streets, it's also access to that school property.
Thank you for the question, through the chair to you. We haven't, I think I can say quite fairly that we haven't addressed the details of that microenvironment of each school. I would hope that in one of the programs that may come out of something that Councillor Cuddle mentioned there, the active school travel, is a school streets program where that's where there's some attention given to that microenvironment. Okay, is it parking? Do they have to go through a ditch? Do they have to go over a snowbank? And then is there, are they able to somehow block off traffic or calm the traffic around the school to do that? Again, and I can't quote chapter and verse from the integrated mobility plan, but I'm certain that that it would encourage that sort of thing, because if you're, that's sort of the last mile for a student getting to class.
Yes.
And if that involves getting their feet wet in the ditch, well, that's a non-starter. So I would think that kind of discussion would be held subsequent.
Right. So we are trying to have that conversation with HRCE, and unfortunately, it's pretty black and white. You're either a walking school or you're a busing school. And so for the children who want to be able to bike or to walk, they're finding it difficult to actually access the school property because that accessibility is, we've got the IMP. But the province hasn't signed on to it, right? And so HRCE hasn't signed on to it. So I think that's something that we need to take back and figure out how can we encourage the school board, for example, to think about moving, not having such a rigid approach to on-school or access to school, whether it's busing or walking. So, I do think that there's some merit in potentially presenting, to the Department of Education and helping HRCE, for example, understand that the streets are just a part of the issue. Because as we've seen with children in the rural areas, anyway, trying to get through ditches, and when we have a beautiful brand new crosswalk on White Hills Run in Hammond's Plains, which we're very proud of, and of course, parents are parking their vehicles on it and blocking the children from actually using the brand new walkway and crosswalk. So we are struggling, but I think more education, and I agree with you, proactive approach is definitely needed. Thank you for your presentation today.
All right, we'll go back to Councillor Cuddle, even though you're not on the list, but you're thinking heavily, I'm sure.
Should we close the presentation, or are we now on? That's it?
There's nothing further. We'll come back with a motion next meeting, or we will plan to. We'll talk to staff about that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, no, I'm happy to talk just a little bit about that, just to kind of put my intentions on the table here. And I just want to say to Councillor Lovelace, it's not only in rural schools where you have those obstacles. It's in schools everywhere. One of the things is about pathway plowing. And so what we're seeing now is HRM is plowing a sidewalk up to the school property, and then HRCE is not plowing it from there to the school. So it remains inaccessible. And yeah, so there is definitely some coordination required everywhere to kind of make that access happen. Yeah, my intention here is to come back to Transportation Standing Committee with a motion to look at how HRM can support and implement an active school transit plan for our schools. We've discussed this at council a few times. I think it was couple years ago, even Councillor Cleary and I made a motion about snow clearing around schools to facilitate walking to school in the wintertime, because some of those streets are priority 2 or priority 3, and you see, mothers with strollers unable to get to school because the sidewalks aren't plowed, or people walking in the street, or areas where there's disconnected pathways to get to school, or no sidewalks at all. And yet kids are required, they can't even bus if they want. They have to walk, and they're walking in the road, and it's extremely unsafe. And I think the benefit of having a program like this is that, walking to school is something that happens every day for thousands of children and parents and younger siblings. And we really need to be making sure that that's safe. It encourages healthy lifestyles. It changes, people's idea of what it means at a young age, of what it means to be able to get around your neighborhood. So, I think this is important. I think there's been a lot of emphasis on kind of a broader scale network of bikeways, which has been important and which we need to do, because everything's, it's a broad approach, but that has come at the expense of really looking at our neighborhood plans. And I think we need to, take a step back and say, okay, what have we achieved at this level, and where else can we be working to make sure that that impact on daily life, in terms of being able to get around safely without a motor vehicle, making sure those opportunities are there for people. So I thank you for your presentation today. It's great, and I will be working with staff on that motion for our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about the Windsor Street Exchange and where you see the shortcomings and perhaps what you'd like to see instead.
Through the chair to Councillor Morse, thank you for that. Talon and I will share this. We don't want to get into the gory details, but we've been through a functional plan. There was some disappointments there. It appeared to be, how do we move vehicles through this space? In the short form. But our concerns is how does the person that lives in the north end get to his classes at the Mount on foot or rolling or by bike? How does the person who works on Kempt Road, who lives in Fairview, get to his automotive service business if he doesn't own a vehicle or he doesn't have access to one? And how does a single parent in Fairview get her kids to the shore of the Bedford Basin? That's the things those are the things that the IMP asks consultants to consider when they're looking at a space, whether it be a place or a link through a space. And that just did not come through loud and clear. The hard-nosed part of it is that people walk, roll, and cycle were consolidated into a single multi-use path.
Okay.
And for the principal entrance into the regional center, and for all the good reasons identified in the IIP, that seems to be a weak way to provide service to people who walk and roll and cycle and take transit. Dallin?
Through the chair, Councillor Morse, thank you for the question. I think it's a question that you're raising, and that's probably why we're here today. About a year ago, when we faced the plans for the Windsor Street Exchange, there was quite a bit of discontent among the advocacy groups. So given that we have limited resources, we pooled our resources and thought very hard about this issue, not only in the case of Windsor Street Exchange. We don't want a project that's going to be laid out at a huge expense and will be with us for the next 25, 30 years and will not serve the needs of our communities in the next 25, 30 years, and the objectives that have been laid out, priorities that have been laid out, and that didn't sit well with us. So what you're seeing today is a deliberation, consultation that went on for almost a year among advocacy groups. And I hope that's going to trigger a more thoughtful conversation among councillors who have the final decision on this thing, and will lead to concrete recommendations that will not only address the issues that we face in the Windsor Street Exchange, but beyond. I think our goal is not to be actually spending too much time in stakeholder meetings. Our goal is to go to a stakeholder meeting and give them 2 cheers and maybe the 3rd cheer as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Morrison. Thank you to the folks who presented today. Really appreciate you coming out as always. And there's no further speakers, so you are released.
Am I together? Is there a opportunity to consider our recommendation as in a subsequent meeting as well?
Yeah, so what my practice is to take the recommendation, because, for example, what you presented is good, it's a good start, but it doesn't say for a staff report, for example, and that kind of thing. So workshop that with staff, make sure the clerks are okay, make sure the lawyer's all right, and then we'll fire it in. So I'll be talking to councilors about that. Okay, thank you, Bill. Thank you both. Thank you. So up next, waiting patiently, 10.3.2, we also had this meeting for you, not just for walk and roll, by the way. Didn't want you guys to wait any longer. We have Janine Mead and Laura Brady from the Oxford Street area who'd like to present about some traffic concerns. The activist community may want to stick around for that. Thank you so much for coming.
So just one sec. Oh, here it is. Am I doing this wrong? Oh, I can see the red light.
You're live, you're started, no worries, and we'll start your 10 minutes now, not then. We're all good.
Okay. Thank you, Chair and councillors, for allowing us to take some time to discuss active school transit. And thank you very much for all the conversations we've had around the table already, and the presentation that occurred already, because I think it gives good background for what it is that we want to speak about. My name is Janine Mead. I'm a parent of 2 children who live in the Tupper School District. They would go to the Halifax Central Junior High and then on to Citadel. And we are considered a walking school. There is no bus transportation for any children except maybe 1 or 2, and that's because they have some sort of accessibility or mobility issue. I'll allow yeah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, I'm Laura Brady. I've got 3 children. I live in the Tupper School District as well. Kids at Tupper Central and as well at Citadel. So we've been around for a while, and I'm also a walker. So I have seen some of these issues firsthand.
I'm a walker and a biker. I used to be a road rider, and twice I sold my road bike because I was like, it's too dangerous in the city. And I don't have a road bike anymore because I just find it's far too dangerous. A friend of mine saw me almost get clipped by a car one time. I'm very encouraged by the conversations that we've had, that you guys were already talking about your concerns around children attending school. I would like to have the agenda reflect change the name of the presentation, if that's possible, to indicate that we're focused not just on the Oxford School area. If I move to... the purpose of the presentation is to inform the Standing Committee of the immediate dangers faced by Halifax Central Junior High and the feeder schools that daily, students that are attending the Halifax Central Junior High and feeder elementary schools are at serious risk of pedestrian vehicle collisions crossing the street en route to the public schools. And I'm going to show you some information about and make it absolutely clear to you, because we have been having this conversation with the Department of Education. We've been trying to have the conversations with Councillor Cleary and with Councillor Way Mason, and over the last 12 to 18 months, and we've made no progress that I can see, like, visually. When I walked to school, I walked to school this morning and walked back, and I haven't seen any changes yet, so I want to make sure that you're aware of what the issues are.
And then our request is immediate assessment and audit of the active school transportation for Halifax Central Junior High and Feeder Elementary Schools. Also to take immediate action to make the catchment area safer for students actively traveling in the public school area. So I know I don't have a lot of time, so this just is kind of a summary of why they're at serious risk of this collision. So it's an active transport school. As I said, they're expected to walk, bike, or scooter. Students must cross very busy streets. As an example, just one sec now. My son walks to and from school 3 times a day. So he walks to school up to 2.4 kilometers as a junior high student. Back at lunchtime, he came home at lunch today in the rain, walked back then, went back to go to school, and then he'll walk back after school today. So, you know, lots of kids in the school go home at lunch, and they are putting themselves at risk every day. My son, we happen to live on Newton Avenue near the Larry O'Connell ball field, so he has to cross Connaught, Quimpool, and Oxford Streets. Like, these are main arteries that he and his peers have to cross every day. And same for Laura's children, they'd be the same, her 3 children. So there's lack of a school zone, any sort of yellow image sign anywhere along the route. I guess once you get closer to the Tupper School, outside of Oxford Street, you can see that, but nothing on Oxford Street or nothing on Quimpool, nothing on Connaught to indicate that you should slow down and you're required to go 30 kilometers. They know Halifax Junior High School used to have the same bell times as Sir Charles Tupper, and therefore would have access to the crossing guard that were available at the time, but then the Department of Education changed it, and so now our children never have access to the crossing guard unless they're running late or actually they'd have to be running quite late every time. There's a pedestrian-controlled amber flashing light crosswalk, which does not require traffic to stop. Just be cautious, proceed with caution is what that means, a flashing amber. And there's no safe official bike routes for students to commute to public schools, and I'll show you a map on that. Active transit for Halifax Central Junior High students has and will continue to worsen as our population booms. So something has got to be done now, because it's a concern now, but it's just going to get worse. And then if I move along, this is just to say Halifax is not safe for pedestrians in general. It's not safe for adults. I talked to crossing guards this morning, and some have had cars brush them as they went by, and they've got bright orange, yellow vests on. And it's definitely not safe for our children who no longer have access to crossing guards. So you'll see all these. Most of these are within the last year or year and a bit. The only one that is maybe 2017 is that Halifax ranks at the bottom of a safe driving study, which is very disappointing. But I know you guys are doing lots of work on that. So you'll see here, this is just a page, you've seen this before, I think it's from you guys, that Halifax Peninsula has the most vehicle pedestrian collisions in all of HRM. And you'll see here where I have just depicted over time that yes, the collisions are maybe getting a bit better, but it's still, the numbers still are not great and not improving fast enough, and there's even fatalities that occur. The bell time change I talked about, it actually absolutely coincides with the worst time, the peak vehicle collisions in HRM, which is very concerning for us. I will tell you, my children have always walked to both schools, and every morning that my son has been walking since there hasn't been a crossing guard, and before that I did it too, but ever since then, I'm like, please be careful, please pay attention, do not get injured. So it's a big concern for many of us. Most child pedestrian injuries and deaths occur in urban areas, and injuries to them are very severe and can result in long-term disabilities, emotional strain, and financial burdens that can last a lifetime. So this is serious stuff we're talking about. So this is the catchment area of the junior high school we have in question. I've identified there where Halifax Central Junior High is, where the Tupper School is. You can see very clearly that Connaught is there, Quinpool's there, Oxford Street, Jubilee Road, depending on which way you're coming from. It's, children are crossing traffic on their own without any assistance, like during rush hour, and sometimes actually it's worse at like when they're coming home at lunch or when they're coming home at 3 o'clock, because actually there isn't any traffic at a standstill there. We're an active transport school, as I said, and they're required to walk that like 2.4 kilometers. This is just to help you depict like where there are all kinds of stop signs. There's all kinds of flashing crosswalks, but there's no like, this is a school zone like you would see on Connaught Avenue when you're heading north towards the school up that way. And this is the bike route legend. I just wanted to kind of depict that on there as well to see, as you can see, there's lots of blue lines there, which is suggested bike routes, but there are no safe bike routes for our children to go to school. So when they're on their scooters or on their bikes, or if they're rolling, if they're walking, it's they're not safe. They're not in a safe environment at all. So specifically, although we have concerns about the entire school district and getting our kids safely to school, the biggest concern that we've been trying to fight for or ask for changes to be made would be in the Oxford and Norwood crosswalk. It's an amber light there. That crosswalk there, you'll see it's kind of in the middle between the 4 boxes. Students cross that street in order to go to elementary school, Sir Charles Tupper, and then students go the other way to go to junior high. And like I said before, they used to have crossing guards that would help them in their commute because of the elementary school, but not anymore. So that has become quite a concern for us. So what I've done here in the next couple slides is just show you some pictures that I would have taken over the years.
I hate to be that guy, but you got 30 seconds left.
Oh my God. Okay.
I may be flexible, but be warned.
I know, geez, we got a big, okay. So you can see in all these pages, you're gonna see this illegal double lane that comes from Quinpool down to Oxford Street, okay? And they are constantly, and so the cars all hug the side so that this illegal second lane happens, and they rush down there, and so many people have almost been clipped. You have been yourself. Crossing guards have been, like I said, because it's not wide enough for a double lane, he gets hit there. And this is a video, and I took a whole bunch of still photos, and you'll see these 2 girls are waiting to cross the street. So the amber light is flashing this entire time. Cars continue to go like south, and it's like they keep coming. They're double lane when they should be in a single lane. There's a car that's on the crosswalk wanting to turn right, and then so then thankfully the crossing guard happened to arrive at 8:15 when they were late for school and helped them get across the street. Like this is very typical. I want you to know this is very typical. And so this is another day. This is in October 2021. Same thing, we had the crossing guard helping junior high students because they were late for school, and you can see there's bus stops there, key issues at the extra wide lane, there's no right on red now down at Jubilee Road, so therefore it's causing more people to go like the Oxford Street way, Quinpool Oxford instead of Connaught. And then there's bus stops at each of, on either side of this Norwood crosswalk that we're concerned about. So this is the same page as before. Just reminding you of this. Our urgent call to action is that we need an active transportation review audit of Halifax Central Junior High, including related feeder schools. And we want you to take immediate action on the audit regarding the most dangerous active transportation situations, including the Oxford and Norwood crosswalk. And that's everything, sorry. Thank you for giving me more than 30 seconds.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for coming. All right, back to the screen to see. I will say from the chair, if I may, I expect Sean's on the list. No, you're not? Oh, I'll go first then. The bump out you want, that we all want at Norwood Oxford is coming in April. It's in the budget. And so the plans have been circulated. They're just finalizing I'm reading from my email, finalizing the turning radius. So that will narrow the southbound Oxford to one lane only. It's going to come out about 2.5 meters there. They'll do it in the, like in front of Jubilee Junction with there. Same kind of thing. And the trees were trimmed last week or in the last couple of weeks to improve visibility of the crosswalk signage and the bus stops. And they're also looking at, which may not be popular with some of the immediate residents, allowing parking along that stretch of Oxford on the same side as the bump out, because it's narrow enough that it can have parking, but it's not wide enough to have 2 full lanes of traffic. And they are looking at the bus stop, whether or not they can consolidate those and move them. But that started before you guys started emailing us, because it was also, the tree is so big now that the bus drivers often have difficulty seeing the people waiting for the bus. So there's talk about consolidating them and moving them. So wanted to give you that quick update, and then we'll go back to the list and see. We've got Councillor Cuddle and then Councillor Cleary. We'll go to Councillor Cuddle first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that excellent presentation. Very impressive, particularly the photos with all the red dots and the collision points. Like, who did that? Nice.
I'm very, very passionate.
Yeah, excellent. So I mean, you heard me speak before to the previous group that, this is a concern everywhere, right? Because it's, whether you're on the peninsula or not, students are required within that 2.4 kilometer radius to walk to school, right? And they don't have busing. So I 100% appreciate everything you said and everything you presented. And, do think we need to take a broad look at this. And, not to make light of this in any way, but I think part of the problem you don't see collisions anywhere else is because parents just won't let their kids walk to school because there are no sidewalks, continuous sidewalks. They're not plowed in the winter, and it's super dangerous in a lot of places. I also, I think it's really interesting to this whole question about like walking and who walks, why they walk. Even when we look at StatsCan data, the statistics around like walking, biking, or cars are really all based on people who are commuting to work. It's not based on information about kids getting to school. I don't think that question is on the census, right? So we kind of have this skewed perspective when we look at statistics about, what are walking communities or not, or where are people required to walk. Either maybe they don't own a car. That question isn't asked either. How do you get to school? Yeah, so, I think we're missing some key data around decision-making for active school transit, and we do need to do a big dive into this and make it a priority. I also sympathize with you, and with Councillor Mason and Cleary around, wanting to see changes happen. Like, I've been asking for 18 months and I haven't seen anything. I'm a first-time councillor, and I can tell you that, change takes time. But having you come and present this to us at Transportation Standing Committee and to councillors helps put this on the radar, and it is a needed discussion. So I thank you very much for being here today. I'm glad to hear that some changes are already in the works, particularly with that one crosswalk. I hope that's encouraging, and look forward to working with you and other groups on how we can advance this whole notion of active school transit in Halifax. Thank you.
Councillor Cleary, questions of clarification?
I'll take some liberties in terms of the questions of clarification, because exactly. But I will endeavor to get some clarifying information for you. So, In the Motor Vehicle Act, when you were talking about the flashing amber light, actually at crosswalks, it does mean stop. It doesn't mean slow down. It's in the Motor Vehicle Act. We could get our staff to give you that information. And for school zones, I forget what the distances are, but we've had this discussion before. There's a distance from the edge of school property where a school zone is. There's ministerial direction, and there's also the sign is in the manual of uniform, traffic control devices, and all these things. All that to say is councilors, unfortunately, don't have the power to do any of these things. It's up to the traffic authority that council appoints under the Motor Vehicle Act. And Councillor Mason and I have had many discussions around this. There's a lot of trust, because once you appoint that person, they no longer answer to council. They can only answer to the provincial traffic authority or the Minister of Transportation, and not us. So all we can do is actually rescind our appointment, and then actually the Minister of Transportation can appoint one for us. So it's a very dangerous situation to be in. But we can offline talk about a lot of the stuff that's in there, and very happy to see, I think you had a question around what was in the budget, because it's not explicitly laid out, but we do have confirmation from our staff that that is in a bundle of traffic safety money that's in there for this coming year. It will be tactical, but it will be of high quality, like Councillor Mason has mentioned, what we see around here with the concrete, the precast concrete curbing, the green ballers and all that sort of stuff. So we can certainly work together to make sure all of the questions in the emails are answered to your guys' satisfaction. But the main point is action will be taken this spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Any final words from you folks?
One thing worth noting.
Click your other mic
sorry,
there.
This one?
There we go, perfect.
One thing worth noting, there are many other parents at these schools who are equally concerned, and many of us have been making phone calls. And I just wanted to express concern about the logistics of bringing concerns to you. We would go from HRCE, who sent us to HRP, and HRP would send us to HRM, and then HRM would send us back to HRP, HRCE or HRP. Like, we have been just running in circles trying to figure out where to take these concerns. We haven't seen anything happen it is about probably 18 months that we were aware of the school time change, which meant our little kids didn't have big kids to walk with anymore, which meant the big kids didn't have the crossing guard. So we've known for a while that this was going to be a concern. It's been now 18 months of many near misses, honestly, many, for kids and adults in all over the city, as I'm sure you know. So I just wanted to express, it's been very difficult to try to figure out who to take these concerns to, and I think there are a lot of other people who are equally concerned and just, kind of gave up after a handful of calls, didn't get them anywhere, or sent them back to the first person that they talked to. So just something to consider. I don't know if there's anything that can be done about that, but that's been a challenge.
I think it's a good note that the HRC has not in the past contacted HRM or HRP when they've changed to school start or stop time. And they should, especially in the walking neighborhoods, more where that is so important. And I think the second issue that is under HRM's control is the policy can be amended on when crossing guards can go out, which is something which has cost implications and should be discussed in budget, but we'll definitely be bringing that forward. So thank you so much for coming down here today. I really appreciate it, and enjoy your walk home. We'll go back there first.
Sorry, one last question. So if we come to the next meeting, you may have, you discuss that, you may discuss this further, and there could potentially be some motions on the table. So for instance, yes, we have identified one specific crosswalk we have our biggest concern about, but Laura saw this kid that was a junior high kid who was walking home, and it was on the Quinn Street crosswalk, and literally she said he was that close to his life being over or completely different. So like, it's not just that crosswalk. I think that you say that you've dealt with one corner of that crosswalk, but if you look at the pictures, there's people who are turning right, and like they're on top of two crosswalks. So it's not only that crosswalk. I hope that you will consider like other areas. And as well, as a point of clarification, Councillor Cleary mentioned this, but if you look at source number 1, according to the Nova Scotia Rules of the Road, amber flashing light has the same meaning as a warning sign: slow down and proceed with caution. So I would appreciate if you want to tell me something different, but drivers out there, when you go on the internet and you search and you say, what does amber flashing light mean? Everyone is asking that question, they don't know. So drivers out there, whether it means stop or not, they don't know it. So it's a concern, and I recognize if you put a red light there, it's going to cause issues other places, but we really think that you need to consider these things. Thank you very much for your time
Thank you.
and consideration.
I like frankly, I like it when residents are persistent and don't take no for an answer. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming out today. So we'll move on. That brings us to item 11, information items brought forward. There are none. Reports, there are none. Members of the Standing Committee, none. Motions, none. In camera, in private, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of November 28th, 2022. Moved by Councillor Lovelace, seconded by Councillor Cleary. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Are there any there are no added items. Are there any notices of motion? Going once, going twice, sold. That brings us to the final act of peace, public participation. There are no registered speakers as of January 25th, 2023. Is there anyone who cares to come forward and make a presentation to the committee? I'll ask 3 times. Come forward, sir. If you could come forward, identify yourself, what the community you're from, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm a member of the local community. I live on Brunswick Street. I am also very concerned about the IMP. Particularly, I'm concerned about the primacy of cycling infrastructure given the number of cyclists in the city. I think that data is hard to come by. As Councillor Cuddle acknowledges, some of that stuff isn't included in the census. There are children that are cycling. But I think by and large, we have some idea of the number of cyclists on our roads, and I think the city's investment in cycling infrastructure is disproportionate to the number of cyclists. For example, I was in contact with Councillor Mason about this. He told me that there were 259,000 cycling trips in Halifax in 2022, according to the city. Those are the recorded trips on the South Park Street, areas where there are protected bike lanes. So obviously that doesn't count all cycling trips, but it counts a large portion of them, and the city's decision to continue investing in infrastructure seems not to account for that stuff, because I was looking, for example, at the Brunswick Street Functional Plan, and there is ample information about the number of vehicles that are traveling on Brunswick Street. There's ample information about the number of parked cars on Brunswick Street. There's ample information about the impacts to traffic on Brunswick Street. There is no information on the number of cyclists on Brunswick Street. And when a large part of that functional plan is focused on building a bike lane, I think that should be included in the staff report. That should be the headline, right? Across Canada, cycling commuting has declined in recent years. In the 5-year period from 2016 to 2021, cycling commuting declined 37.6%. In 2022, across Canada, there were 215,000 regular cycling commuters, people whose primary method of commuting is cycling. That, accounting for Halifax's share of the population of the country, means that there's something like 2,500 cyclists in the HRM. So all of the city's investment in bicycling infrastructure is to meet the needs of maybe 2,500 regular commuters. And that fact just doesn't get reported. I don't know why there isn't that information in staff reports. So we see about 0.7% of commuters in the Halifax census area are by bicycle. And the number of active commuters, according to Stats Canada in 2021, on bicycle was 1,160. I think in either case, a small minority of commuters are riding bikes, far less than drive, far less than walk, and I think the city's investment in that infrastructure has not seen returns. Approximately 40% of a cycling network has been built according to the city. We have not seen that result in more cyclists on the roads, according to any available data source. So I don't know why the city keeps investing in that kind of infrastructure, particularly when members of the community speak to you and tell you that they don't want it. For example, the owner of Steve Areno's, the owner of the optometry clinic on Brunswick Street, both expressed concerns about the Brunswick Street functional plan and the way it changes the road. Those concerns were largely ignored when the city proceeded with the plan, and will get rid of those parking spots and reduce the lanes. So I think the city would be better served by incorporating sound traffic engineering and responding to how people are actually using the roads, the majority of which are using motor vehicles. right? Metro Transit remains an unreliable and time-inefficient method of getting around the city, and I think further investment in that program is actually good. But I don't think that's what's accomplished when the city builds a bike lane on Brunswick Street. I don't think that encourages transit users. I think there's nothing more frustrating than walking down my street and seeing no one in the bicycling lane and knowing that there's going to be a concrete barrier and worse traffic from getting rid of a turning lane on Sackville Street. I think you can see that on Hollis Street right now. You can see that on South Park Street, especially on a day like today where it's raining heavily. The number of cyclists is minimal. If you look at the data that the city's collecting, if you look at the data even from cycling organizations, the number of cyclists on the road is at most 2%, and I just don't think that the city's investment in that type of infrastructure is seeing any kind of returns. And I think it's very concerning that that information isn't included in the staff reports the city compiles, because they have that data and they decline to include it in the staff reports. I think that's severely problematic. The transparency of staff reports being available to the public means nothing if the information the city has on the way people are using the roads isn't included in those reports. Thank you.
Could you identify yourself for the record? Your name?
I'm Anish Naqvi.
Thank you. Questions, so I'll turn to the audience. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak today? Please come forward, sir. Thank you very much for coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Shane O'Leary. I'm the president of the Amalgamated Transit Union. We weren't aware that we were allowed to make presentations today, so I'm not totally prepared. But I'd like to ask about Protection of Property Act in the transit industry. Our buses have operators out there who have no protection. We are unsafe. The city has removed the designation of Protection of Property Act from our buses. We have no idea why. We were told by Councillor Mancini that he was going to do a presentation here regarding it. We are unsafe in our workplaces, and we need something to change. With the change to fares for under 12, it's producing a lot of problems in terminals. The Bridge Terminal is unsafe. The Lacewood Terminal is unsafe. Our buses are unsafe from this uncontrolled ridership. We have no policing. We have no support. We're literally out there on our own, and now the Protection of Property Act has been removed. So our members don't know who's violent and who's not violent. We no longer have pictures posted. For many years, we could tell who was allowed on the buses and who was not allowed on the buses. We can no longer do that. You can ban somebody from the garage, or you can ban somebody from here, or you can ban somebody from a terminal, but I can beat up a bus driver and get off that bus and get on the next bus down the road, and nobody will stop that person from getting on. Same as a ferry. Nobody will stop them. We're unsafe. We need action, and there's something wrong with this city if you can't protect somebody in their own workplace as an employee.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Cuttle, for questions of clarification only.
Yeah, thank you. And so I just also want to thank Anish, the previous speaker. It's important when people come and speak to us from the public in this opportunity. Yeah, in regards to what's happening on the buses and with bus drivers, I think it's in the headlines we see there's issues of violence on public transit across the country. There's a lot in the news recently about the TTC. I'm just wondering, do you have the numbers, of the number of assaults on bus drivers that are reported, and even ones that might not be reported? I realize that a lot of things don't get reported officially. If there was some data that you could share with us about this, because it is a concern. We're looking at attracting new employees to Halifax Transit. We're looking at, we're cutting services. We know we need bus drivers, and if
if this is part of the puzzle and all of that, it would be good to know. And I think bus driver safety is important. So do you have any numbers on that?
Ironically, I do have numbers on that, but they're sitting on my desk in my office because we did not assume we would be allowed to make a presentation. And we had to use the Freedom of Information Act to get those numbers because we could not get them through the employer. So yes, we do have numbers, and there are many assaults, and there is laws in Canada to protect us, and they're not being used either. We are unsafe in our workplace. Nobody here should be unsafe in a workplace. We are. And that Protection of Property Act is huge. We are short-staffed. I think we've had 7 or 8 resignations already this year. They're cutting 29 shifts, 43 pieces of work in the next pick. We're a growing community. We're a growing city. We should be advancing it. We should be moving forward. We should have more employees. We should have a lineup for employees in a municipality such as this, one of the fastest growing municipalities in the country, one of the fastest growing provinces in the country. But yet nobody wants to work at transit. They're walking away. And everybody can tell me, yep, we're hiring. Not hiring quick enough. We lost 130 people due to attrition last year and hired probably 80. And most of those left.
All right, well, if you could share those numbers with us, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cuttle. Councillor Lovelace on clarification.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for being here today. Just to clarify, anyone's welcome to make a presentation. We had a representative of the union come to budget, the firefighters union come to budget this week to make a presentation. Certainly just reach out to the clerk's office and you can have your 10 minutes. My question for you, because I did hear you on the Todd Vino show, I think it was earlier this week, ask this same question or talk about the Protection of Property Act, which is provincial legislation. And in reading that legislation, which hasn't been updated since 2001, it includes motor vehicles of all kinds. It doesn't specifically remove or restrict the acknowledgement of transit. It includes motor vessels, motor boats, all vehicles. So I'm not sure if this body is the right body to respond to your question about the Protection of Property Act. But I think that it's important for us to have this conversation around the safety of transit operators because it is an essential service that our municipality relies on, as well as municipalities outside of HRM, people who are coming into the park and rides and using transit to get to work downtown from Lunenburg County, Chester, East Hants, the Valley, and so on and so forth. So I just want to encourage you to come forward and make a fulsome presentation, to request to make a fulsome presentation. But specifically, when it comes to your question about Property Act, have you spoken with provincial representatives on that?
We have reached out to MLAs. We have reached out to councillors. We have reached out to the employer. We have reached out to the media now. And that's the only way we're getting attention. We are not an essential service. You like to say we're essential, but we're not deemed an essential service. We are not. We are working in a dangerous environment. If council thought it was important, maybe they should be talking to the provincial government about the legislation. You said vehicles. We are being told that because a bus does not have an address, they cannot issue a PPA. We cannot get direct answers from anybody.
Okay, well, there is a joint regional transportation network between the municipality and the province, so certainly I am hopeful that that conversation is taking place. That being said, I look forward to seeing you in council chambers again. Shane, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. There's no further questions on the board, so thank you for coming today. Are there anybody else in the audience who'd like to come forward who has not spoken? Anybody else to speak in the public presentations? Are there any further folks who want to speak in public participation? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next item. The date of the next meeting is February 16th, 2023. I'll take a motion to adjourn. I think Councillor Lovelace beat everybody, so we are adjourned. Thank you.